welcome to the Human Pulse podcast, where we talk about living well with technology. I'm Anne Traeger.
And I'm Fabrice Newman.
We are recording on December 8th, 2024.
Human Pulse is never longer than 30 minutes, so let's get started.
The big news today, Fabrice, is that I've added a social media channel, and it's all your fault.
Yeah, right. So let's make something clear first. I didn't force you to do anything, right?
This is true. There was no force involved.
It was mostly linked to my enthusiasm to a somewhat new network that everybody's talking about these last few weeks, last few months, even now. It's, of course, Bluesky, where I started to find something that I loved in Twitter and that love disappeared a few months ago. There are many reasons for me to leave Twitter. So I have a complex relationship with Twitter. This is basically the social media I had chosen before, years back. And this is where I had found a balance between the people, the news I could find there, the way I can interact with it and not being overwhelmed. It was really the place I chose. And then a few things changed. Obviously, let's talk about the elephant in the room. It was bought by Elon Musk, and some changes that were made after that didn't agree with me. First of all, there's obviously the political side of things, but I don't think it's the main reason why I stopped using it. There are technical reasons. For example, on Twitter, some people were getting a blue check mark because they could that blue check mark before Musk was a way to ensure that the person or the company that was talking on Twitter was the real one, and it was really a check. And after that, the check mark just became a sign of somebody paying Twitter for subscription, and it didn't have the same meaning exactly. So I was on the lookout to find another network where I could find something and the same kind of, let's say, atmosphere. And first I tried Mastodon. Some people probably heard about it, but not that much. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not really on there. I have an account, but I'm not really on there. It's a bit technically more complex, and it was only adopted by basically tech people and geeks, part of my crowd, but not only what I search in a social network. And then Bluesky is basically what Twitter used to be. So this is what I actually started using, and I really found something there that I really like. And you heard me raving about it, right? And so you decide to open an account, and that's the real deal.
This is true. You raved about it for like 2 or 3 weeks nonstop. And at that time, there was this massive move of journalists and other people from Twitter to Bluesky. So not only were you raving about it, but it was being echoed in the various feeds that even I was seeing. Okay, well, maybe I was seeing them because of you, but anyway. So I am now testing it out. I like this idea of maybe more real interactions, less subjected to, algorithmic, whatever, black magic, I like to call it. We will see if I get dumber from using it, or if I get lost, or if it, or even if it adds some value. I'm not exactly sure yet. It's too soon to tell. Right now, I can assure you of the power of cat photos. Okay. I don't think that's specific to any social media. Cat photos work.
Let's be clear that the internet was created to share cat photos and videos.
I agree with that. I'm sure that is true. Okay. Okay. But we have to put this into context for people who don't know me. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my history with social media. Right from the very beginning, I found that I only had a moderate interest in any of the social media platforms. Okay. I didn't find anything like you found on Twitter. No judgment for people who use social media all the time. I personally get overwhelmed with all the nonstop messages and the proportion of emptiness in what's being communicated. Even in non-digital life, I really much prefer deep conversations or silence over that whole bit of stuff that happens in between.
For me, it's a way to circle back to what I was saying. Twitter was the social media, social network I chose. So, for example, not to feel overwhelmed by having to go to several social networks, because it's part of what's happening today again, because lots of people started to move away from Twitter and so go to Mastodon. We've already talked about it, to Threads as well, which is the Meta slash Facebook response to the problems Twitter is having. And so, and then you have LinkedIn, and you still have Facebook, and you have so many places to go to. That to me is the overwhelming part, right? You were talking about the exchanges, the place where you can meet people, or maybe not because it's not real. For me, Twitter was very real. Aside from getting news, this is, for example, where I met the people I do the other podcast I do iWeek on, right? Through Twitter. I had real exchanges on Twitter with them. And then at some point we started to have a conversation, and they invited me on, and now I'm part of the team. So it's like a real, success story, if you will, of Twitter / social media.
Well, and I agree with you. I'll be completely honest. I've met people on social media as well, and have some interesting exchanges. I think proportionally speaking, there's a whole lot that's depending on the social media itself. There's a whole lot that's less real, if I'm going to say it that way. But I do think that the ability to communicate with so many people is really, really crazily wonderful, and actually a little bit weird. I'm not entirely sure that we as human beings are made for that kind of massive communication with the world all at once. And I'm not just making that up. There was a theory that was developed in the 1980s by the University of Oxford anthropologist and psychologist named Robin Dunbar, and it's called the social brain hypothesis, and it gives a number which is called Dunbar's number, which is 150. So according to the theory, this is the limit that our brain can handle in terms of meaningful contacts. Now, he gives a bunch of other numbers, and it can, depending on how deep the contact, it can go up higher than that. However, even in the social media age, according to subsequent research, this number pretty well holds. So for me, when I think about it, there's something comforting in knowing that, for me, that, okay, so if I feel a little overwhelmed by social media, there might be a reason for it.
Yeah, true. So I think it goes back to what we were saying about Facebook. When Facebook appeared, and the relationship you have on Facebook, the links between you and the other users, they use the word friend. You are friend with someone and someone's on Facebook. And it's weird because the word friend basically changed meaning because of that, because Facebook is still used by 3 billion people on Earth or more. So I guess to me, it means that these are tools. And once again, as per usual, I'd say it's a tool that we need to learn how to use. So I don't think going in social media means that you're going to interact with all the accounts, all the people or media that you subscribe to, that you follow. It's not what it means. Sometimes you can have conversation with people that you don't know in real life, and it might happen a couple of times and then it stops. It doesn't have to go further than that. And I would say this is part of the power of social networks and medias, which is to put you potentially in contact with people you otherwise would not meet, right?
True. And fabulous. Wonderful.
Yeah, this is absolutely fabulous. I think the other problem we are seeing with social media is the way they changed. Before, in the before times, 15 years ago when they were created or something. So you would go there, you would get information or interesting links, and you would click on something, and then you would go away from the social network. It would be a way to find something and then to leave. But obviously, it's not what those companies want, because they need to have a return on investment, because it it's very expensive to put in place. So they created algorithms to increase engagement. And this is where, for me, it all crumbles. Because when you further engagement, what it means is that these social media networks want you to stay on them. So for example, it means that if you post something with a link on it, maybe your post will not be seen by as many people because it's not the kind of engagement they want. They don't want you to propose something for people to leave. They want you to propose something for people to stay on, and that's a real problem. And this is where, coming back to Bluesky, it's gets interesting, because Bluesky doesn't rely on that. This is not the promise they are making. We'll see if they can keep it, because that's obviously always the same problem. How do you monetize, and how do you make sure that the network can still run? But what they say is you can use Bluesky without algorithms, where, we all have those examples using Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or what have you, where you have this algorithmic feed where it's not only people you follow, but the algorithm is, or TikTok, obviously. This is the big elephant in the room.
Okay.
I don't think about that because I don't use it. But basically what it means is that on your feed, you have lots of things that you didn't ask for. And the algorithm is trying to guess what you're going to like for you to stay as long as possible.
Well, and that's, at the same time, it's part of what is so wonderful about the serendipity that you can have on social media. And it brings me to this question of what I'd like to address today, which is how do we live well with social media? Because I know personally that I am not strong enough to resist the work of all of those thousands of engineers who worked on those algorithms to hack my dopamine system. Okay. So I'm just not strong enough for that. So I have to do something about it. And one of the things that I do is to have very clear boundaries. I mean, I'm really, really very keen on boundaries. And it is a tool that, speaking of tools, that I use in order to work and to live well with social media. This comes from, it reminds me of the relationship that I have with just empty time. I don't particularly like to have empty time. I mean, whenever I have a moment that's empty, I will usually fill it up with something. Maybe I'll move about, or I'll clean the house, or I'll meditate, or I'll do something, I have to fill it up. I use a word for that. I call it being an infiller. Okay. Some people don't have that problem. I do. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a problem. It's just the way I am.
No, but this is what makes you such a particularly good candidate for algorithms, because this is what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know this about myself. So self-awareness is another really important tool. So I know this about myself, and I'm very wary of social media. Okay. So I know that if my eye catches the glimmer of the phone at just the right time, like when I have an empty moment, and then I pull up something like Instagram, oh my God, scroll. I mean, before I know it, all of my empty time, and some time that was not meant to be empty, has fallen victim to, just one more flick of the finger. And, I feel like I don't want to miss something, a picture or a quote that could be interesting or whatever. I mean, and sometimes I even fall into doom scrolling. I mean, who wants to be doing that? Okay. But I know why. I understand it. And I know that I am subject to that kind of thing. There is a quote from St. Augustine. So I think he had some sort of future vision about social media, because obviously there was none of it at his time. And he said, complete abstinence is easier than perfect moderation. So sometimes I go with complete abstinence, okay? Because the scrolling just topples all good intentions. I don't know how to stop. So at the same time, so I don't completely abstain from social media, because there is this sort of frivolous joy that I get in it, okay, that I like. And there is what you were saying, that serendipity of meeting people and learning about things that you never, ever would learn about if you weren't on social media.
So what do you do then?
That's a really good question. So what do I do? Okay. again, I'm very clear about my boundaries, and it takes this form. So I make up these rules. First of all, I am no longer on Instagram because that one was just like so totally addictive to me. I just was like, okay, no, that's total abstinence for me.
I agree with that.
I do use LinkedIn because I think there are some really interesting connections that we can make on LinkedIn, but I set aside specific bound time, what I call bound time. There's a beginning and an end for LinkedIn. Once in a blue moon, I will drop into Facebook, and then I only give myself a limited time. And again, the timer is set, okay, when I go onto Facebook. Okay?
I admire that, like, having a
No,
timer.
I mean, because otherwise it's just,
Yeah.
I'm out of control. I don't have that kind of self-control. I mean, people think of me as this like super disciplined queen who's got so much self-control, but I don't really. I really have to work hard on it. Okay. Okay. So the other thing is I have no apps on my phone for social media. So that means it creates friction. If I want to use social media, I have to go and open my laptop. I have no shortcuts on my laptop so that if I want to open a specific social media, I actually have to open the browser and then, go and click in all the right places. Again, I'm putting friction so that I'm not so tempted to go to them at all times. Okay. And I also avoid YouTube whenever I can because there's just so much there that I can get sucked into and just get totally lost in things. So the thing is now that so those are my rules. Okay. And then I started testing Blue Sky. Well, I broke all of my rules. It's on my app. I mean, the app is on my phone. I have shortcuts, so,
I'm sorry.
yeah, I know. I don't know what's going to happen. I do realize I see immediately that it does, even in the way that it's set up and less reliant on algorithms and all of that, it does require a high level of self-control for me to manage my own use. So we'll see how it goes. How do you handle this social?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the first thing I did actually, is to actually choose a social network, right? I tried a few and then I thought, okay, I cannot be on them all and it doesn't make sense to me, at least. So after I chose Blue Sky because it was getting some traction, people were getting on it. So now it's like 25 million people on it. And so I find things on it. So I can go on it and find some interesting things. So I chose that and LinkedIn, which means that these are the only ones that are on my phone, for example. And they're still on my phone. And I even have notifications for Blue Sky, not for LinkedIn. I tried that for LinkedIn for a while. So to make sure that, not that I didn't miss anything, but to basically start my engagement. And now I know I can go there and I don't need to be prodded to go there. Blue Sky is for now still a work in progress, so I still have notifications. But I don't have other social media platforms on my phone. You could probably say there's an exception for YouTube. I don't have the app for a number of reasons, but I still go on YouTube through my phone sometimes. But the thing is, what I did to fight against the algorithms on YouTube, which are very powerful as well, I followed a more technical route, if you will, which is I have a browser extension that cuts the shorts on YouTube.
Okay.
Because the shorts are really a never-ending time sucker if you start.
Okay. Interesting.
Right?
Interesting.
So at least for me. So I have something that removes the short section on YouTube, so I don't see them. Okay. This is a way for me to win that struggle against that.
Yeah. Well, so I think it's really interesting because here we are later on in our, in our lives and aware of how we manage self-control and what we do. And some people are not so aware, and young people are using a lot of social media. So it begs the question as, is this a good thing? And the reason I talk about it is because recently Australia voted in legislation that is supposed to prohibit social media use for individuals under the age of 16. And okay, this is probably going to be completely impossible to actually implement, but this is the sort of date or the age limit that people are talking about, that social media has a negative impact on young brains prior to that age. Now, since the brain is still in formation to the age of 25, maybe it lasts till later. But anyway, who knows? I mean, I see it has a negative impact on my own brain. So, and well, some people would probably say my brain is already calcified. So there we go.
I would say that.
In joking, of course.
Yes.
So there is a lot of work that is being done on this topic of kids and their brains and social medias. There's a social psychologist named Jonathan Haidt who wrote a book called The Anxious Generation, which explores, how these, not only social media, but the phone-based childhood is different from a play-based childhood. We'll link to it in the show notes. And these studies aren't fringe, okay? The United States Surgeon General released a social media advisory in 2023 about social media and mental health. The Mayo Clinic publishes guidelines for parents of teens. And I thought this was interesting to mention because in those guidelines, they mention setting limits, which is something we talked about, and also making the phone use a reward for time spent outdoors. And I thought, wow, that's great. I don't need to be a teenager to put that in my rules. Maybe I can't use my phone until I actually get outside a little bit, and it would do me some good.
Yeah, maybe so. So there is still a number of problems with that. For example, when you mentioned the age limit that was actually signed into law in Australia, there's obviously, it opens a whole new kind of worms, because how do you enforce that, right?
Yeah.
And there have been lots of discussions here in France, for example, on the same somewhat topic, not for social media, but for porn sites, where, it's would be, I think, a good thing for younger people not to be able to go on those porn sites so easily. And so one idea is to make sure that there's an age gate, if you will. It's so difficult to put in place without impeding on privacy. How do you make sure that you check the age of somebody going online without knowing who they are? That's very difficult to do, which is also why, and for other lobbying reasons, porn sites are still very easy to go to.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to do that. And some people also say it should be left to the parents, who supposedly know more about their kids than anybody else, and probably the government. Obviously, the problem here is some parents are overwhelmed by all those technical points.
Right.
Social media is still a technical point for some of them. It's probably resolving itself because parents today were kids yesterday, like 20 years ago, where computers were already in use. Our parents would have been completely overwhelmed and would not have known what to do. Today's parents, younger parents, they know somewhat, but then also the horizon, the technical horizon, is moving so fast that I'm not so sure. So there needs to be some tools to help those parents. Actually, this is what I would say.
And there are tools out there, and there are organizations that do work on how to parent in this age. The Anxious Generation is just one of them. There are other organizations out there who are really tackling this issue. So there are resources for parents to figure this out.
Yeah, I would mention ConnectSafely.org as a website. You can go find some resources on that.
So I think what it comes down to, and one of the things that comes out in the studies of teens as well, is that it's not all bad. There's good stuff that comes from social media and phone use as well. As with everything, it's what you said earlier. These are tools, and it's about how we use them and how we communicate about them, which harks back to the parenting thing. How are we talking about this with our kids, and what are we doing with that?
And so To finish on a brighter note, I would like to bring back the fact that the social media, as every tool, it's also made by what we do on it, right? So I don't know if we can counteract what Saint Augustine said, but we can each participate to make it better by sharing some positive things. And maybe think twice or maybe more before posting an angry reaction to someone else's post, right? So maybe it's a bit naive, but if you think about those algorithms that we mentioned before, right? This is what they do. They give you back what you gave.
Yeah, what you put in. Yeah.
What you put in, right? So maybe we have to think about that and be more positive on those social media networks as well, and try to basically a bit fight against those algorithms trying to keep you in that angry and emotional states that they want you in, so you stay on.
There's some research that was done in positive psychology realms that defined a ratio of the number of positive things that you need to outweigh the negative things. So you need 3 positive things to outweigh a negative thought. So maybe we could all, apply that rule. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Okay, it works better at 5 or 7, but you can save a marriage with 5 or 7. Okay, but maybe we could save social media by every time we saw something negative by throwing out 3 positive things. I don't know. This is my crazy idea for today.
Let's try that. I have to admit, it's a bit disheartening to see that it's an uphill battle because you have to do way more positive things to outweigh the negative things. But okay, let's try that. And I think that will help make the world a better place.
Well, and it's the way our brains are made. It's because, at the time that our brains developed, we really had to pay a whole lot more attention to the negative stuff in order to survive. Now that we know that, yeah, maybe we can try this tactic in order to bring a little bit more positive into the world.
And I would say, actually, Bluesky is helping with that because, okay. Try it.
Okay.
You'll see. And you'll...
On that note, that's it for episode 7. Thank you for listening. You can find all the links mentioned in this episode in the show notes directly in your podcast app. And don't forget to go to our website, humanpulsepodcast.com, to find out more information and all of our previous episodes. humanpulsepodcast.com.
Thank you for subscribing, sharing, and please leave a review to help our wonderful podcast to be found. And we'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Bye all.
Bye.